those are all elements of priming, in that the thing that happens before the decision, the sense, the sights, all these experiences, the word choice, all of that ties in with how we feel about.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Scott Branley. I'm here with my co-host DJ Sprague and our special guest today, Melina Palmer. Melina, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
It's nice to have another geek.
Another geek.
Yeah.
Another behavioral science geek.
Yes. Nerds of the world unite, right?
That's right. And this book, if you haven't read it, The Truth About Pricing, is absolutely amazing. Highly, highly recommend you get that book. We'll be talking about some of the principles and concepts in The Truth About Pricing today, which really delves into the psychology and the behavioral economics behind pricing, price strategy, positioning, messaging, and an entire really integrated strategy that validates your pricing position. But before we get into that, let's introduce Melina. Melina is CEO of the Brainy Business, which provides behavioral economics training and consulting to businesses of all sizes from around the world. Her podcast, The Brainy Business, Understanding the Psychology of Why People Buy, has more than 1 million downloads. Congratulations. She teaches applied behavioral economics through the Texas A&M Human Behavior Lab and obtained her master's in behavioral economics from the Chicago School. So welcome again, Melina. We're excited to have you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so I think the best way to start out is, can you talk to us a little bit about what behavioral economics is and why it's important in business?
For sure. And believe it or not, I start this way most of the time, right? As it's not a field that tons of people are familiar with. I'm guessing a lot more that listen to your show because, like you said, you guys are big fans and whatnot. But essentially, I like to say that if traditional economics and psychology had a baby, we would have behavioral economics. And the reason that the field came about is because traditional economics assumes logical people making rational choices in everything they do all of the time. And, we're human, and that's not really how it works. And so what you had is these models that would predict what someone somewhere decided people should do instead of what people actually do. And so you had psychologists and neuroscientists and economists working together or entering into one another's fields to try and discover if there were ways to better predict real human behavior. And thankfully, there are. And those make up the concepts of behavioral economics, behavioral science. And it's important for business because, even as we have more happening with AI, machine learning and things, your customers are still human people. Many of your employees are still human people, and understanding how they make decisions and how to better communicate with them is important. So, yeah.
Fantastic. It really is fascinating, isn't it? How the more we learn, the more we realize there is very little rational decision making. It's really not as logical as we'd like to think it is. It's a lot more based on impressions and emotions and subtle inputs that we're not even aware of. So that brings us to the next question, which is, tell us a little bit about the psychology of pricing and why the truth about pricing is not about the price at all.
Yeah. Well, and that's, we don't have to worry. We didn't give away, spoil the ending or anything of the book. I think I say the truth about pricing, page 3, that it's not about the price. That's the real thing here.
Right.
And so, just really what happens when it comes to whether or not someone decides that they want to buy something is about so many of these other things that come before the price. And so understanding that the way you say something matters, how you present the information matters, whether or not people feel safe with things like social proof, your reputation really matters. All of these tie-ins are so important, making sure there's cognitive ease, that there's not too much information or too many choices or that we feel confused. And if you can make it so that these things line up in a way that is helpful for the brain, it's super easy to buy, and it's really not about the price. Whereas if you have a lot of people that are kind of hemming and hawing when they shouldn't be and bringing up all these other points and not feeling quite ready to make a decision and haggling over prices and things. There are things that you can adjust by understanding these aspects from psychology to help to make it easier for people to buy from you.
So one of the things you talk about in your book is a value brand versus a quality brand. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Absolutely. And I have made a claim that I know is difficult for many to accept in the book, and in the approach here, that you do. One of the most important decisions for you to make as a business is to decide whether your brand is one of quality or one of value. And I know this is difficult because people say, I want both of those things, right? I want to be both of them. They both sound really good, and people care about those things. And the reason that it matters to pick a lane in this way and not live in the gray is because that gray space is very confusing for people. And for the brands that do fully own being either of quality or of value, it makes it to where it's just easier to buy because you know what you're getting, and we know how to categorize your brand, and it can then be, part of our identity in a different way. And so a quality brand would be one that is selling, luxury goods come into this space if you are catering to celebrities or things like that. If you have additional certifications beyond what others have, if your brand is invested in extra research and development or innovations, you are on that quality side. And yes, you can still provide value to people, but you lead with quality. And there are different ways that you look to apply items or these concepts throughout the way that you're presenting pricing and your brand. And one of those would be, a question that I get all the time is if prices should end in a 5, a 7, a 9, a 0, what do we do? And people get really hung up on this. So a quality brand in general should have that whole number rounded pricing. So you're 500 instead of, say, 499. And so we can already sort of feel that difference. So that's one way that we'd say, you're going to be in that quality space, whole number pricing. The other side, being a value brand, is that you are associated with discounts and bargains and being that great deal of value to your customers or members or whomever it is that you have. And you probably run a bunch of sales and you're ending those prices in, nines or sevens or whatnot. So, being 499 instead of that 500. So Costco is a really great example that I showcase in the book of a really good value brand. And you can see and feel it in everything that they do, right? There's a reason that they have, things on pallets and cement floors, and you're obviously in a warehouse, and their website is not flashy by any stretch of the imagination. It kind of feels like it's, from 20 years ago compared to a lot of other sites. But we appreciate that because they're not investing in things that aren't important. It's a simple site, but it's not about like the type of simple that you would get from, say, a like Cartier website, or if you were going to Louis Vuitton or something, right? To where that is a simple elegance that was, they spent a ridiculous amount of money to get that experience of simplicity compared to what you get on a Costco. And when everything lines up like that, it's so much easier to buy and trust those companies.
Yeah, if they made it too nice, it would be cognitive dissonance between the experience you have in the store and the experience that you had on the website. They almost have to make it a certain way to fit that, that overall brand messaging.
Exactly. And you can't, where it's this, from the last time I was on the Costco website, things always change, but it's very boxy, right? There's blocks of things that you're going to look at, and the headlines, the names of the categories that they have. It's the deal of the day and these great values and things that you're going to experience there, and it's just the hot deals and steals sort of a approach to it. But again, simple boxes that just can sort of stack and be changed around versus this experience, that you may get in the same way from, say like Tiffany or something. You go to their website, it's also very simple, like, but elegantly simple. And it matches when you go in. And if you're, shopping about for engagement rings, and they give you a glass of champagne and this whole, kind of swept up in the velvet chairs and all of this experience that you have. But that's a part of the investment you're making, and the memory that you have of buying that item is wrapped in the experience that you had while you were shopping, and you remember, right? So brands are memories, and all our experiences with them are as such. And so you need to make sure that everything is reinforcing what you want people to know and think and believe about your business, and just stacking it up. So if you don't make a decision and say, we are quality, and that means we never do discounts. Like Louis Vuitton has said they'll never do discounts, right? And we aren't going to be on these sites, and we're not going to do X, Y, or Z. We then, because, we're a herding species, and we get in the, cold and hot states, we think, okay, we'll be quality, and we'll deal with that, whatever that means. And then it gets to be, the end of the year, and everybody's running a sale. You go, oh, should we run a sale? We didn't plan something. Let's just throw it together, and we'll just give everybody 40% off. And you've just degraded everything about this quality brand that you've been building, because in that moment, you didn't have that decision that you had made earlier to say, no, we don't do this because X, Y, or Z, and like owning that space.
So that kind of leads us into system 1 and system 2 thinking. So could you tell us a little bit about how those two different types of thinking work and how it makes people feel about price?
For sure. So, when we think about our brains, I personally tend to not use system 1 and system 2, because I find it to be actually a very system 2 process for people. It's hard to remember which is which. And so even though it's not used by everyone, I just like to say conscious and subconscious, right? For people, it's easy to know what we're talking about here. And one of my favorite ways to understand how this works is just to use from Jonathan Haidt, talking about that we should think about our brain like a person riding an elephant. So you have that logical, conscious rider that knows where it wants to go and sees the best path out there, and like says, I've got a plan. I am ready. I'm pumped. I can see it out there, right? I know what we're doing. Unfortunately, that, logical, conscious rider is at the mercy of the elephant, right? That subconscious elephant. And if it wants to run in another direction or sit down or go slow and get distracted, you can't push or pull or logic the elephant into doing what you want it to do. The rider has to understand how to properly motivate the elephant to stay on path. And so that 6-ton behemoth of that subconscious processing is what we like to focus on in behavioral economics, behavioral science. I use that elephant example. That subconscious processing is actually very fast, right? So it's the quick, when we see something and you just can feel, might say you have a gut instinct about something, or I'm not sure why, I can't quite put my finger on it, but X, Y, or Z, that is our habits and how we're making the bulk of our decisions. So, research has shown that humans make up to 35,000 decisions a day, each of us. And if we're constantly making these little micro decisions, the only way that can be done is by that subconscious elephant making the bulk of that decision making for us, using habits, predictability, and the status quo as a real anchor for it. And so understanding how the elephant makes decisions and aligning your communication to be easier to, be in line with that is what I do as an applied behavioral economist, and what we talk about, in all my books and working in the field of behavioral economics.
So when it comes to decision making, and like we were just talking about value brands versus quality brands, how much different is the decision making process between make a decision for a quality brand versus making a decision for a value brand, and system 1 and system 2?
It's not necessarily about the process being hugely different from one to the next as much as it is about, thinking about the experience that you want people to have with you. And so with any brand, you want to be thinking about, like I said, that, in the brands being memories piece, right? And so if you want to think about being consistent in everything that you're doing, everything that you say, your image choices, and even simple little things like font. All the things that don't feel like they should matter really, really do, because we're looking for that cognitive fluency. And so if you can really own whichever side you want to be on, then you can be making it easier for people to have the right triggers in the behavior and understanding what motivates someone. So, which aspects of behavioral science you want to apply to help and how to talk about them. So, on the value side, knowing that we love a deal, we have, loss aversion in that, like, don't want to miss out on a sale, let's say, right? We've got the FOMO of this thing's going to be ending. We have some scarcity, maybe time pressure. If there's a clock counting down or something that, oh my gosh, I have to go get some things because they're going to be gone and I don't want to miss out on the sale. And there's a bit of the thrill of the hunt and feeling very accomplished that you got the deal, or there's also, as we have anticipation and dopamine is released of whether you're gonna win or not, and you get the delightfulness of having there are a lot of these bidding types of sites right now, and so like Temu and things that are popping up that are really going hard in this space, to where you pay a little bit and you might get this very expensive item, and that joy of winning and things that can be coming on that kind of value side of things. So those are some aspects maybe that you'd be thinking about. I want to be checking in regularly to see if they have a good deal. I feel like I want to win. It's again that kind of thrill of the hunt sort of approach to that bargain sale discount side. And brands like Ryanair, who I talk about in the book, they have accepted that they're a value brand through and through, and they've picked a word that a lot of brands would shy away from because it feels bad in some ways, to say that they are cheap flights, that they're cheap. Now, cheap is a word that kind of feels that way, right? We don't want our company to be tied to that. But for Ryanair customers, that's exactly what they want. They are delighted that you're cheap. They're looking for that. And when you can own it and know that that's actually a positive, it again makes it easy to buy that. You know what you're looking for. You can refer people to it. Really, really easy. When we think about the quality side of something like even that same concept of loss aversion and the fear of missing out, it's actually often tied into an identity piece and social norms and being part of the herd and being accepted and saying, look at, you like those sneakers, I like those sneakers, and we're these kind of people, right? It's that affinity, it's that bond, and we don't want to miss out on what the group is doing and be the only one that isn't doing this. Or maybe we want to be looked at with a different level of prestige because we have this particular bag or we use this brand, and it ties into your identity in a way that you really bond with those companies. A lot of our favorite brands, when we talk about those ones we really truly love, are on that quality side, right? Because it says something about us and who we are. And if you then are mixed or muddled and it's not, about these aspects of psychology, it's really just hard for your customers to do that.
So could you just give us a couple more components about it's not about the cookie framework, or it's not about the pricing, just a
Yeah, for sure.
couple more kind of hardcore components?
Yep. So we've already talked about many of them as we've gone through the process without necessarily naming them. So within the framework, the first is priming, which is our scent of the cookies, which I'll get back to in just a second. We also have scarcity in the, today only that you get this item. We have social proof that was in the line of people that was there or in writing our reviews and our testimonials. We do have loss aversion, that fear of missing out and the perceived ownership that comes up within that process. And then now I am going to be losing. So we have framing, which is how we say something matters more than what we say. So in the first version, I said, buy 3, get 1 free. And in the second, I said, oh, if you buy 4 cookies, you only have to pay for 3 of them. Super clunky and weird. So that how you say it matters more than what you say. And then the last aspect within that framework is reciprocity of that little gift that we give and people feel compelled to give back. In this case, that free sample is something that you're giving to help somebody want to then give back a little bit, often by buying something from you. So one of my favorite concepts and where I tell a lot of people to really start is in that framing space. That how you're saying things is either working for or against you. And often when we're kind of left to our own conscious brain devices, it's working against us far more often than we realize. And so, the example, we had the buy 3, get 1 free. Really, we do feel like we want to buy more when something rhymes, or we trust people when there's a rhyme. It feels more knowledgeable and trustworthy. We also, if people can say things simply and clearly, we think that they're more knowledgeable and trustworthy. And so taking the time to do the edit, to know what it is that you want to say, to make it clear, easy to do business with you. I find that that's a gift too, where we start to merge these together, right? But giving people the gift of an easy buying process, a reduced friction, knowing what it is that you're telling them to do and how it's going to align with them and what they're trying to accomplish. And so that reframe and knowing that if people aren't buying the thing that you're selling, it may not be that the price is wrong or the product's wrong, but you might just be not talking about it very well. And so my favorite example here is just to imagine that you're at the grocery store, you need to buy some hamburger. They have 2 stacks almost identical. One is labeled as 90% fat free and the other one is 10% fat. Which one do we want to buy? And overwhelmingly, all around the world, people say they want 90% fat free, right? That's the one that they want. Logically, we know they're the same, feels so different to our brains, right? So if you can find, where are you talking about something and it's actually coming off as 10% fat, right? And how might you reframe and talk about it as 90% fat free in a way that people think, ooh, like that, what a good decision I'm making for myself, right? It just feels very different when we hear it that way. And even better, if you're in an industry where everybody talks about everything in this kind of 10% fat way, how can you be the one person that is talking about it 90% fat free? Even if you're saying exactly the same thing, it just feels very different for people. And they're more likely to want to buy and work with you versus the competition. So framing that concept there is a really great place to start. And then making sure that everything lines up. Those are all elements of priming in that the thing that happens before the decision, the sense, the smells, the sights, all these experiences, the word choice, all of that ties in with how we feel about the brand and the decision. And that's that aspect of priming. That's that scent of the cookies.
Thank you. Yeah. Appreciate that summary and bringing that all together.
And that framework is really powerful. I could see how that going through that could really help people. All right. Well, this has been amazing. We usually end our podcast with a final question. We call it the $1 million question. What's one actionable strategy that you think could have the biggest impact for a business that has to do with pricing?
I would say is to not make the thing you want people to buy be the most expensive thing that you sell. And also to be thoughtful about the order in which you talk about things. You may feel compelled to start low and work your way up to the thing that people should buy, but we end up anchoring someone on a low price. So when you know the thing you want people to buy, let's say it's something that costs $10,000, right? So if we start low and say, oh, we have these things at $2,500 and that, but there's this $10,000 thing, you should buy that, right? Feels bad. But if you make it, a wingman is what I call it, something that's better than the best offer, but most people don't need, and say this is a $19,000 package that we have. We'd be delighted if you bought this thing. It's really great. We also have this $10,000 option that's best for, most people choose this one. Which one would you like? 10,000 feels much more reasonable when we started high and worked our way there. And the thing we want to sell is that $10,000 item. So we need to kind of showcase and look at it in that way. So those concepts there are anchoring and relativity coming in as we think about how we're framing our offer and things like that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, thanks again for joining us today. It's been a really exciting show to learn more about the psychology and the positioning of pricing and your brand in the marketplace. And it really isn't about the price. It's about how the product is positioned, as Melina so expertly walked us through these concepts. So thanks again for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.